has other plans. We babies are having a crisis. Choo-choo on that. Oh my God. Today's the day I see the boss baby.
The Boss Baby. My God, I've been reviewing movies on YouTube since 2009, and I wrote reviews of movies before that. I'm rarely embarrassed to say that I saw a film. But in the case of The Boss Baby and Smurfs The Lost Village, my very nice wife said, hey, I'll go see it with you if you go. We'll sit through it together. And I was like, okay. So now I get to review The Boss Baby. This movie is about a baby that's an adult, and it's in a baby's body, basically. It's like a baby that was made, I guess, by some factory, and it has the intellect of an adult, voiced by Alec Baldwin, who gets sent to a family with a mother that was pregnant, but the baby arrives in a taxi cab, and the older brother is really jealous, and he's not getting time with his parents as much anymore, so he wants to do something about this baby before it's too late and before he loses his family forever, so they have to kind of become a small team to figure out how to get exactly what the other person wants. And I don't really understand this movie, actually. It's a little confusing. This is a film that is, in a way, told from the perspective of the main boy, the older boy. You get a narration from Tobey Maguire, and you assume that that is him as an older person, now telling a story to somebody or something. And so we get to watch this young kid get used to having a baby brother. But he also has a very active imagination. And we're often shown these sequences where he's using his imagination. The animation format changes, and it's very old school style, very 1960s, 1970s retro animation, in which he's a pirate or he's in space. He's doing fun things with his parents. But as the film continues, and more magical, impossible things start happening, the line between his imagination and reality kind of got blurred for me as the viewer. And I was like, okay, did that just actually happen? Because that makes no sense. And something happens at the very end of this movie that I won't spoil, of course, but it kind of makes you sit back and go, okay, so does that make sense now all of a sudden? But then something else happens and you're like, oh, okay, so no, I guess it is weird and what the hell just happened? This is for kids, right? The filmmaker chooses to specifically animate the imagination sequences completely differently from the things that are actually happening. And so whenever he is like pretending to be a pirate or he's on the high seas, you're like, okay, I get it. He's using his imagination right now to give himself courage to do something that maybe he was afraid of or just to have fun. But then later in the movie where there's a rocket ship and magical puppies and airport security, that's the worst airport security I've ever seen in my life, these seem to be animated as if they're actually happening. And so I don't really understand what the filmmaker's trying to say with this movie. Let's forget about all that because honestly, no kid who sees this movie is going to care. Is this movie funny? Will kids be entertained by it? I would say. Alec Baldwin is really good as the baby. The actor who portrays the young boy is also really good. There is a nice little bond that develops between the two, and what this movie really touches on that I think kids can take away from in a positive way is the fear that you get as a child when you discover you might be having a sibling and you wonder, is the attention going to wane from me? Are my parents still going to love me? This is something that I think kids will appreciate and possibly take away from the movie, the eventual message that we learn. And since it does touch on that fear that a lot of kids have when they find out they're going to get a brother or a sister, that is probably the most praiseworthy aspect of this film, along with the really good animation. Strangely, I'm not entirely sure where this movie takes place either. It seems to have a 1970s aesthetic. Pretty much every song is from around that era. There's a lot of Elvis stuff as well in this movie, and pretty much all of the fonts for the opening titles or when they go to a city and you see the "Welcome to this city" sign, the font is very retro, and it almost seems like it's taking place in the 60s or 70s. And it's weird that I'm thinking that much about The Boss Baby. Why am I thinking that much about The Boss Baby? Don't I have anything else better to do today besides sit here and analyze The Boss Baby? The first half of the movie was just kind of annoying. The baby was just way too much. He really got on my nerves. And towards the second half, it did pick up a little bit as the two begin to bond. But the film just doesn't really make sense. It's almost like it takes place in a fantasy world. And as I said, when the film ends, you're given a little thing where you're like, oh, okay, well maybe now it does kind of make sense. But then something else happens that kind of ruins all that. So this movie's kind of an enigma. Again, I'm looking at this from an adult perspective. Kids who see this movie will be like, baby, made funny jokes, yay. They talked about poop and the kid got hit in the balls, yay. Poop and balls. I don't know. I'm gonna give The Boss Baby a C. It's not awful. It looks a lot worse than it is. The trailers for this movie make it seem like it's a complete pile of shit. There are some good messages for kids, and the animation is pretty good, and there are a few adult jokes that my wife and I laughed at, but in the end, it's pretty much an annoying, forgettable movie that doesn't really make sense when you think about it. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.